Hello everyone. Before the story start, tell me where are you watching from and what time is it?
The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the block where the old theater stood. The marquee was dark, missing letters, as it had been for years. I barely glanced at it as I passed. Then I heard it. A phone ringing. I stopped. The sound was coming from ahead, from a phone booth I had passed 1,000 times without noticing. It stood on the corner, its glass panels grimy, its receiver waiting on the hook. And it was ringing. I looked around. The street was empty. No one else was there to hear it. Just me, and the ringing phone, and the wet night. I walked toward it slowly. The ringing continued, steady and insistent, like someone who knew I was coming, who had been waiting for me to answer. I reached the booth. I stood outside it, looking at the phone through the grimy glass. It rang again. And again. I opened the door. The smell of old metal and stale air washed over me. I stepped inside. The ringing was louder now, filling the small space, demanding attention. I picked up the receiver. Hello? A pause. Then a voice. Familiar and strange, like a dream I'd forgotten, like a memory from another life. It's me. I knew that voice. I had known it once, long ago, in a time before this city, before these streets, before the long nights of walking home alone. It was a voice I had loved. A voice I had lost. I don't understand, I said. You're not, you can't be, I know, the voice said. I'm not there. I'm not anywhere. But I needed to talk to you. Just once more. I leaned against the glass wall of the booth. My legs felt weak. How is this possible? The voice was quiet for a moment. Then, the city has ways. Places where time bends, where distances collapse, where the lost can find each other again. You've seen them. You've walked through them. I had. The leaning buildings. The frozen birds. The corners that moved. The still point where the city turned around me. I've missed you, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I've missed you too. The voice was soft, sad, warm. I've missed you every day. We were quiet for a moment, connected by this impossible call, by this city that bent time and space to let us speak. Are you okay? I asked. Wherever you are. A pause. Then, I'm okay. I'm at peace. I just wanted you to know that. And I wanted to hear your voice one more time. Tears were running down my face. I hadn't cried in years. I had forgotten what it felt like. I love you, I said. I never said it enough. I never, you did, the voice said. You showed it. Every day. Every way that mattered. The line crackled. The connection was fading. I have to go, the voice said. But remember, I'm still here. In the city. In the spaces between. In the moments when you pause and listen. Wait, I love you too. I always will. The line went dead. I stood in the phone booth, the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to silence. The dial tone didn't return. Just emptiness. Just the memory of a voice I had forgotten I missed. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe. When I finally hung up the receiver and stepped out of the booth, the night was the same. Wet streets. Humming streetlights. Dark buildings. But I was different. I walked home in a daze. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. The familiar route, but I didn't see any of it. I saw only the phone booth, only the receiver, only the face I hadn't seen in years. I slept. When I woke, I told myself it was a dream. A hallucination. The product of too many nights alone, too much tiredness, too much grief I had never properly felt. But I knew it wasn't. I went back to the phone booth the next night. It was just a phone booth, grimy and forgotten, its receiver silent on the hook. I stood inside it for a long time, waiting, hoping. It didn't ring. I went back the next night. And the next. Nothing. But on the 4th night, just as I was about to give up, it rang. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper I couldn't quite catch. Then nothing. But it was enough. It was something. I go back now, every night. Not expecting, not demanding. Just hoping. Just listening. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the city is still, the phone rings. Sometimes I hear a voice, clear and warm. Sometimes just a whisper, a breath, a presence on the line. It's enough. It's more than enough. I passed a phone booth, and it rang with a voice I'd forgotten. Now I pass it every night, hoping to hear that voice again. And sometimes, I do. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the block where the old theater stood. The marquee was dark, missing letters, as it had been for years. I barely glanced at it as I passed. But something made me stop. She was there. Pressed against the wall of the theater, her ear flat against the old brick, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. She was listening to something I couldn't hear. I walked toward her slowly, not wanting to disturb whatever she was hearing. When I was a few feet away, she opened her eyes and looked at me. She smiled that small smile, then pressed her ear back to the wall. I stood there, watching, waiting. The street was silent except for the usual hum of the streetlights. I couldn't hear anything from the wall. Just brick, just age, just stillness. After a long moment, she pulled back. She nodded, once, at whatever she had heard inside. "What is it?" I asked. "What do you hear?" She looked at me with those ancient eyes. "Everything. The building remembers. Every conversation that ever happened inside these walls. Every laugh, every cry, every whisper. They're all still here, pressed into the brick like fossils." I looked at the old theater. It had been closed for years, dark and empty. But she said it was full. "Can anyone hear them?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "Not anymore. Not most people. But the walls remember. They hold everything. They never forget." She stepped aside and gestured toward the wall. "Listen," she said. "Press your ear to the brick. See what you can hear." I hesitated. It felt foolish, pressing my ear to a wall like a child listening for secrets. But I had learned, over these many nights, to trust her. To do the thing she asked. I stepped up to the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold, damp brick. At first, nothing. Just the rough texture of old brick against my skin. Just the faint chill of the night seeping through. Then, slowly, something changed. I heard voices. Faint, distant, like echoes from very far away. Laughter. Music. The rustle of fabric, the shuffle of feet. A woman's voice, clear and sweet, singing something I almost recognized. A man's voice, deep and warm, telling a story I couldn't quite catch. The theater was alive. Full of people, full of sound, full of moments that had happened decades ago and were still happening, somewhere, in the memory of the brick. I pulled back, gasping. The sound stopped. The wall was just a wall again. She was watching me, that small smile on her lips. "You heard them," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. "The walls hold everything," she said. "Every building in this city. Every brick, every stone, every beam. They've witnessed everything. They remember everything. They're just waiting for someone to listen." I looked at the theater with new eyes. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of ghosts, full of echoes, full of life that had never really ended. "There are more," she said. "All over the city. Walls that remember. Walls that wait. Walls that will tell you their stories if you take the time to listen." She reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, solid, real. "Come," she said. "I'll show you." She led me through the sleeping city, from wall to wall, from building to building. At each one, she pressed her ear to the brick, nodded at what she heard, then gestured for me to listen. I heard a schoolyard, full of children's laughter from 50 years ago. I heard a bakery, its ovens humming, its baker singing as he worked. I heard a house where a family had gathered for dinner every night for decades, their conversations layered like sediment in the walls. Each wall held its own world. Its own time. Its own voices, waiting to be heard. We walked until dawn began to lighten the sky. She stopped at one last wall, an ordinary brick wall behind an ordinary building. "This one is special," she said. "Listen." I pressed my ear to the brick. At first, I heard nothing. Then, slowly, a voice emerged. Familiar. Warm. A voice I had heard before, on a phone that rang in the night. It was speaking to me. Telling me it was okay. Telling me to live. Telling me it loved me still. I pulled back, tears streaming down my face. She was watching me, her ancient eyes soft. "Some walls hold more than memories," she said. "Some walls hold the ones we've lost. Not their ghosts, their love. Their hope for us. Their wish that we keep living, keep listening, keep loving in return." I pressed my ear to the wall again. The voice was still there, faint but present, speaking words of comfort, of peace, of love. When I finally pulled away, the sun was rising. The city was waking. The walls were just walls again. She was still there, watching me. "Thank you," I said. She smiled. That small smile. "You're welcome." She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time you listen. Every time you press your ear to a wall and hear what's inside. I'll be there, listening with you." Then she was gone, and I was alone with the ordinary wall and the rising sun. I still walk that route every night. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. But now, when I pass a wall, I pause. I press my ear to the brick. I listen. And sometimes, I hear things. Laughter from decades past. Music from forgotten times. And once in a while, a voice I know, speaking words of love from somewhere beyond. She pressed her ear to a wall and nodded at what she heard inside. Now I press mine too. And together, we listen to the city's memory. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the alley behind the old theater. It was a shortcut I sometimes took, a narrow passage between buildings that shaved a block off my walk. The walls on either side were covered in graffiti, layers of paint, tags, images, words. I had passed it hundreds of times without really looking. Tonight, I looked. The graffiti was shifting. Not dramatically, not violently. Slowly, like clouds moving across the sky, like water finding its level. The colors swirled, reformed, settled into new shapes. Tags became sentences. Images became words. The whole wall was rewriting itself. I stopped and stared. The graffiti continued to shift, letters forming and dissolving, words appearing and fading. It was like watching a conversation written in living paint. Then the shifting stopped. The wall was still. And on it, in letters that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, were words. Words I had never said aloud. Words I had thought, in my darkest moments, in my loneliest nights. Words I had kept locked inside, afraid to speak, afraid to admit, afraid to let anyone see. They were there, on the wall, for anyone to read. I stepped closer. The words shifted again, becoming new words, new thoughts, new secrets I had never shared. The wall knew me. It knew everything I had never said. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her ancient eyes fixed on the shifting graffiti. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at the wall with something like reverence. "It knows you," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. "The city hears everything," she said. "Every thought you never spoke. Every word you swallowed. Every secret you kept. The walls remember. The graffiti writes them down." I looked at the wall. The words had shifted again, becoming something new, something I hadn't even known I felt. The wall knew me better than I knew myself. "Why now?" I asked. "Why is it showing me this?" She looked at me with those ancient eyes. "Because you're ready. Because you've stopped hiding. Because the city wants you to see what you've been carrying all these years." I reached out and touched the wall. The paint was warm under my fingers, alive, pulsing with the words it held. "Can I change them?" I asked. "Can I write new ones?" She smiled. That small smile. "You already are. Every thought you think, every word you finally speak, every secret you let go, the wall shifts to reflect it. You're writing on it right now, just by standing here." I looked at the wall. As I watched, the words shifted again, becoming something softer, something kinder. Thoughts I hadn't known I had, feelings I hadn't acknowledged, were appearing in living paint. "What does it mean?" I asked. She stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes, the slight smile on her lips. "It means you're not alone. It means everything you've ever felt, everything you've ever kept inside, is seen, is held, is real. She reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart. They're all here, she said. All the words you never said. And now they're there too. She gestured at the wall. You're written into the city. You always have been. I looked at the wall. The words had settled now, forming a single sentence, simple and clear, asterisk you are not alone. Asterisk I felt tears on my face. I hadn't cried in years. I had forgotten what it felt like. She squeezed my hand, then let go. I have to go now, she said. There are other walls to tend. Other words to reveal. She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you speak a word you've kept inside. Every time you let the wall shift. I'll be there, reading with you. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the wall and its words. I stood there for a long time, reading and rereading the sentence that summed up everything I had needed to hear. Asterisk you are not alone. Asterisk it was simple. It was everything. When I finally walked home, the words stayed with me. They echoed in my mind, warm and steady, a comfort I hadn't known I needed. I still pass that alley every night. The graffiti still shifts, spelling out new words, new thoughts, new secrets I never said aloud. But now, I don't fear it. I welcome it. I watch the wall reveal what I've been carrying, and I let it go. Sometimes I speak the words aloud, just to hear them in the air. Sometimes I just watch them shift, knowing they'll change again tomorrow. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wall is still, I see her reflection in the painted surface. Watching. Smiling. Reading with me. The graffiti shifted, spelling out words I never said aloud. Now I say them. And the wall shifts again, making space for new words, new thoughts, new secrets waiting to be spoken. Asterisk you are not alone. Asterisk the wall told me. And for the first time, I believe it. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the block where the old theater stood. It was always the same, dark windows, faded marquee, bricks stained by decades of weather. I had passed it 1,000 times without really seeing it. Tonight, I noticed something else. An alley. Between the theater and the next building. Narrow, dark, uninviting. I had passed it 1,000 times too, always ignoring it, always walking past without a glance. It was the kind of alley children are told to avoid, the kind that exists in every city, forgotten and ignored. I was about to walk past it again when I heard the voice. My son. I stopped. My heart stopped. My breath stopped. It was my mother's voice. Soft, warm, familiar. Coming from the alley. From the darkness I had ignored my whole life. I turned and stared into the narrow gap between the buildings. It was dark, so dark I couldn't see more than a few feet in. But the voice had come from there. I was sure of it. Mom? I whispered. My voice was small, uncertain. No answer. Just the silence of the wet night, the faint hum of the streetlight, the distant sound of a car somewhere. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. I told myself it was exhaustion. Hallucination. The kind of thing that happens when you've been awake too long and your brain starts playing tricks. I turned to leave. My son. Again. Clearer this time. Closer. It was her voice. Undeniably, unmistakably her voice. The voice that had read me stories at bedtime. The voice that had called me in for dinner. The voice that had told me she loved me, every night, without fail. I walked toward the alley. The darkness swallowed me as I stepped between the buildings. The walls pressed close on either side, brick damp with moisture, covered in graffiti I couldn't read in the gloom. The ground under my feet was uneven, scattered with debris I couldn't see. I walked deeper. The alley seemed longer than it should have been, longer than the buildings could possibly allow. The light from the street behind me faded, then disappeared entirely. I was in absolute darkness, guided only by the sound of her voice, calling me forward. My son. Come home. I followed. I had to. It was my mother. She had been gone for 10 years, but here she was, calling me from an alley I had ignored since childhood. I walked for what felt like hours. The alley twisted and turned, opened into small spaces, narrowed again. I stumbled over things I couldn't see, scraped my hands on walls I couldn't avoid. But I kept going. Her voice kept me going. Finally, I saw light. Faint at first, then brighter. The alley opened into a small courtyard, lit by a single streetlight. In the center stood a woman. It was her. My mother. Younger than I remembered, healthier, her face smooth and unlined. She wore the same dress she had worn in my favorite photograph of her, the one I kept on my nightstand. She was smiling. "Hello, my son," she said. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the woman who had been dead for 10 years. She walked toward me slowly, her steps light on the wet pavement. When she reached me, she raised her hand and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm. Solid. Real. "I've been waiting," she said. "So long. So long." Waiting for what? My voice was a whisper, barely audible. She smiled. That smile I remembered from every good moment of my childhood. For you to come. For you to finally look. For you to stop ignoring the alley. I shook my head, confused. I didn't know. I never knew you were here. She nodded slowly. I know. That's how it works. The alleys we ignore as children, they hold the things we've lost. The people we've lost. Waiting for us to be ready to see them. I looked around at the small courtyard, at the single streetlight, at the walls that enclosed us. Is this real? Are you real? She touched my cheek again. As real as you need me to be. I wanted to stay. More than anything, I wanted to stay in that courtyard with my mother, to talk to her, to hear her voice, to tell her all the things I had never had a chance to say. But something held me back. A feeling. A knowing. This wasn't right. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. You can't stay, she said, as if reading my thoughts. Not yet. Not now. But you can come back. The alley will always be here, waiting for you. How do I find it again? She smiled. You already know. It's the alley you ignored as a child. The one you always walked past without looking. It's been waiting for you your whole life. She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did, the way all the impossible things faded. I love you, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Her smile was the last thing to go. I know. I've always known. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the small courtyard, under the single streetlight, surrounded by walls I didn't recognize. I found my way back through the alley. It was shorter now, easier, the darkness less absolute. I emerged onto the street where the old theater stood, under the humming streetlight, in the wet night. I stood there for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. My mother had called my name from an alley I had ignored as a child. And I had answered. I had gone in. I had seen her. I still walk that route every night. I still pass the old theater, the coffee shop, the bookstore. But now, when I reach the alley, I stop. I look into its darkness. I listen. Sometimes I hear her voice. Faint, distant, calling my name. I don't go in every time. I can't. But I know the alley is there, waiting. And I know that someday, when I'm ready, I'll go in again. And she'll be there, waiting for me. I heard my mother call my name from an alley I'd ignored as a child. And I answered. I always will. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood under the streetlight, facing me, her arms at her sides. Her face was calm, patient, those ancient eyes watching me approach. I slowed as I got closer, unsure what to expect. When I was a few feet away, she raised her hand and pointed. Not at me. At something behind me, something across the street, something I hadn't noticed in all my years of walking this route. I turned to look. A building. Old, familiar, the kind you pass without thinking. But one window, on the 3rd floor, was lit. A warm, steady glow, like a lamp left on for someone coming home. I stared at it. Something about that light tugged at me, pulled at memories I couldn't quite reach. Do you recognize it? She asked. I shook my head slowly. I don't think so. She smiled. That small smile. Look harder. I looked harder. The building. The window. The light. And slowly, like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals, a memory emerged. I had lived there. Years ago, before I moved to this neighborhood, before the job at the pharmacy, before the route I now walked every night. I had lived in that building, on the 3rd floor, in the apartment with the window that faced the street. And I had left a light on. The night I moved out, I was in a hurry. The moving truck was waiting, the new apartment was across town, and I was stressed and tired. I packed quickly, checked the rooms, locked the door. But I never checked the lamp by the window. I never turned it off. That was 7 years ago. That light, I whispered. It's still on. She nodded. It's been on ever since. Waiting for you to come back. I stared at the window, at the warm glow that had burned for 7 years without anyone to see it. 7 years of electricity, 7 years of bulb changes I hadn't made, 7 years of light in an empty apartment. How is that possible? I asked. She stepped closer, standing beside me, both of us looking up at the window. Some things don't obey the rules. Some things wait. That light has been waiting for you to notice it. To remember it. To come back. I felt tears in my eyes. I didn't understand why. It was just a light. Just an old apartment I had left behind. But something about that steady glow, burning through all those years, touched me in a way I couldn't explain. I should go up, I said. Turn it off. She shook her head slowly. No. You shouldn't. Why not? She turned to me, and her ancient eyes held something I had never seen before. Tenderness. Deep, profound tenderness. Because it's not waiting to be turned off. It's waiting to be seen. To be acknowledged. To be remembered. That light has been burning for 7 years just so you could stand here tonight and know that something of you still exists in that place. I looked back at the window. The light seemed warmer now, brighter, as if it knew I was watching. Can I go in? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you can try. I crossed the street. The building's front door was unlocked, the way old buildings sometimes are. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was dark, quiet, the same as I remembered. I walked to the door of my old apartment. The door was unlocked too. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. The furniture was gone, I had taken that, but everything else was the same. The same scuffs on the floor. The same marks on the walls where pictures had hung. The same smell, faint and familiar. And the lamp by the window. Still on. Still burning. Waiting. I walked to it and touched the shade. It was warm. 7 years warm. I looked out the window. Down below, on the corner, she was still there. Watching. Waiting. I wanted to turn the lamp off. Every instinct told me to turn it off, to end this impossible thing, to close the chapter. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I left it on. I walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, across the street, back to her. It's still on, I said. She smiled. I know. Why? She took my hand. Her touch was warm, solid, real. Because some lights aren't meant to be turned off. Some lights are meant to burn forever, waiting for the person who left them on to come back and remember. I looked up at the window. The light glowed steady and warm, a beacon in the night. Will it ever go out? She squeezed my hand. When you stop remembering it. When you stop coming back to look. As long as you remember, it will burn. We stood together on the corner, watching the light that had waited 7 years for me to see it. I still walk that route every night. And every night, when I reach the corner of 5th and Wells, I look across the street at the 3rd floor window. The light is still on. Still burning. Still waiting. I never go up anymore. I don't need to. The light knows I remember. I know it's still there. And somewhere, in the glow of that impossible bulb, she's watching too. Smiling that small smile. Remembering with me. She pointed to a window where a light I'd left on still burned, years later. And I understood that some things never stop waiting for us to come back. Even when we've forgotten they exist. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the wind, picking up, stirring the wet leaves in the gutter. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. The wind followed me. Not threatening, just present. It carried sounds I couldn't quite make out, whispers almost, fragments of something I almost recognized. I stopped and listened. Sorry I didn't call. The words came from nowhere, from everywhere. A voice I knew. My voice. But not now, years ago. Younger. Softer. Should have been there. Another fragment. Another apology. Another moment I had let pass without speaking. The wind swirled around me, carrying these fragments of sound, these pieces of words I had meant to say and never did. Apologies to friends I had lost touch with. To family I had neglected. To someone I had loved and let go without a proper goodbye. I stood in the middle of the empty street, letting the wind carry these fragments past me. Each one was a small wound, a moment of failure, a word left unspoken. Love you still. That one hurt the most. I knew who it was for. I had never said it properly, never let her know how much she meant to me. And now she was gone, and the words were just fragments in the wind. I walked on, but the wind followed. It carried more fragments, more apologies, more unspoken words. They swirled around me like leaves, like memories, like regrets given voice. At the next corner, she was waiting. She stood under the streetlight, her dark hair moving in the wind, her ancient eyes fixed on me. She didn't speak. She just watched as the wind brought its fragments past us both. The wind remembers, she said finally. Everything you never said. Everything you meant to say and didn't. It's all still here, carried on the air, waiting to be heard. I listened to the fragments swirling around me. So many of them. So many moments I had let pass. Can I still say them? I asked. Can I still apologize? She looked at me with those ancient eyes. You can try. But the people therefore, some of them can't hear you anymore. Some of them are gone. I knew that. I had always known that. Then why is the wind carrying them? What's the point? She stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes, the slight smile on her lips. The point isn't for them to hear. The point is for you to remember. For you to feel. For you to carry these words with you, even if no one else ever does. She raised her hand, and the wind seemed to gather around her, bringing its fragments close. Listen, she said. I listened. The fragments came faster now, a cascade of unspoken words, of apologies never made, of love never declared. They washed over me, through me, filling me with a sadness so deep it was almost beautiful. When the wind finally stilled, I was crying. I hadn't noticed when I started. She was still there, watching me with that ancient patience. What do I do now? I asked. She smiled. That small smile. Now you carry them. You carry all these unspoken words with you, and you let them remind you to speak. To say the things before it's too late. To not leave fragments in the wind. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time the wind carries fragments. Every time you remember what you meant to say. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, the wind quiet around me. I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of all those unspoken words. They were still there, somewhere, carried on the air, waiting to be remembered. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the wind picks up, I hear them. Fragments of apologies I meant to make. Words I should have said. Love I should have declared. I listen now. I let them wash over me. And I try, in my small way, to speak the words before it's too late. To not leave more fragments for the wind to carry. The wind carried fragments of apologies I'd meant to make. And I let them remind me that some words can't wait forever. Some words need to be spoken now. Before they become just fragments in the wind. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner where the bus stop used to be. It wasn't there anymore, they had moved it years ago, rerouted the buses, left this spot empty and forgotten. But tonight, something was different. A bus stop was there. Old, rusted, the kind they had 20 years ago. And sitting on the bench, waiting, was a boy. I stopped. I stared. The boy was maybe 16, thin, with a backpack at his feet and a look of hopeful anticipation on his face. He kept looking down the street, waiting for a bus that would never come. I knew him. I knew that face. I had seen it every morning in the mirror, 25 years ago. It was me. I walked closer, slowly, not wanting to startle him. He didn't seem to notice me. His eyes were fixed on the empty street, watching for a bus that had stopped running long before he was born. I stood a few feet away and watched him watch. He was so young. So hopeful. So sure that the bus would come, that it would take him somewhere important, that his life was about to begin. I remembered this moment. Not specifically, but the feeling of it. The waiting. The hoping. The absolute certainty that something good was just around the corner. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say, the bus isn't coming. It never came. You'll wait here for hours, and then you'll walk home, and you'll never find out where that bus was supposed to take you. But I didn't. I just watched. He shifted on the bench, pulled his backpack closer, checked his watch. He was patient. He was hopeful. He believed. I felt tears in my eyes. You remember this, a voice said beside me. I turned. She was there, standing next to me, watching the boy with those ancient eyes. I nodded. I remember waiting. I don't remember what for. She smiled. That small smile. That's the thing about hope. It doesn't need a reason. It just waits. We stood together, watching my younger self wait for a bus that would never come. He's still here, I said. After all these years. Still waiting. She nodded. Some versions of us never leave. They stay at the bus stops, in the hallways, on the street corners where we left them. Still hoping. Still waiting. Still believing. I looked at him, at me, sitting on that old bench, his face bright with expectation. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to tell him everything that was coming. But I couldn't. He couldn't see me. He couldn't hear me. He was frozen in his moment, waiting for a bus that existed only in his hope. What happens to him? I asked. Does he ever get on a bus? She looked at me, and her ancient eyes were soft. He gets on many buses. Just not this one. Not today. This bus stop is for a different kind of waiting. I didn't understand. But I felt the truth of it in my bones. The boy stood up suddenly, shouldered his backpack, and walked away. He didn't look back. He just walked down the street, into the darkness, disappearing around a corner. He gave up, I said. She shook her head slowly. No. He moved on. There's a difference. I watched the corner where he had disappeared. I felt a loss I couldn't name. Will I see him again? She turned to me, and for once, her smile was different. Brighter. Kinder. You see him every time you remember what it felt like to hope. Every time you wait for something with that same expectation. He's always there, just around the corner, still walking, still looking for his bus. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you wait. Every time you hope. I'll be there, on the bench beside you. Then she was gone, and I was alone at the old bus stop, the one that hadn't existed for years. I stood there for a long time, thinking about the boy I had been. So hopeful. So sure that something good was coming. He didn't know about the years of ordinary days, the disappointments, the dreams that never quite came true. He just waited, full of light, full of belief. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when I pass the corner where the bus stop used to be, I see him. Sitting on the bench, backpack at his feet, looking down the street with that same hopeful expression. He never sees me. He never will. But I see him. And I remember. I saw my younger self, waiting at a bus stop, still hopeful. And I understood that hope never really dies. It just waits. At bus stops. On street corners. In the hearts of everyone who ever believed that something good was coming. Even when the bus never arrives. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood under the streetlight, facing me, her arms at her sides. Her face was calm, patient, those ancient eyes watching me approach. I slowed as I got closer, unsure what to expect. When I was a few feet away, she looked down at the pavement. At a crack. An ordinary crack, the kind that appears in every city sidewalk, ignored by everyone who passes over it. She knelt down. She traced it with her finger. The crack began to glow. Not brightly, not like light. Softly, like embers, like something waking from a long sleep. It spread from where her finger touched, growing wider, deeper, becoming something more than a crack in the pavement. I watched, unable to move, as the crack opened into a path. A narrow way, leading down, leading somewhere I couldn't see. Stone steps appeared, worn smooth by years of use, descending into darkness. She stood up and looked at me. "There's something down there," she said. "Something you closed too fast. Something that's been waiting for you to come back." I looked at the path, at the steps leading into darkness. I didn't want to go down there. Every instinct told me to stay on the surface, in the familiar world, away from whatever waited below. But I knew she was right. There was something down there. Something I had closed too fast, years ago, and never opened again. I took a step onto the path. The steps were solid under my feet, real in a way that surprised me. I descended slowly, one step at a time, the light from the street above fading behind me. The darkness wasn't threatening. It was patient. Waiting. At the bottom of the steps, a door. Old wood, dark with age, with a handle worn smooth by hands I couldn't see. I knew this door. I had stood before it once, years ago, and I had closed it too fast. I had walked away without looking back, convinced it was the right thing to do. Now it was here again. Waiting. I reached for the handle. You don't have to open it. Her voice came from behind me. I turned. She was there, at the bottom of the steps, watching me with those ancient eyes. You can go back up. Close the crack. Pretend this never happened. I looked at the door, then back at her. But if I do, I'll never know. She nodded slowly. That's right. You'll never know what's behind it. You'll carry that not knowing with you forever. I thought about that. About all the doors I had closed too fast. All the chances I had walked away from. All the things I had left behind without really looking. I turned back to the door. I took the handle. I opened it. The room beyond was small, simple. A single chair. A single window, looking out on a garden I didn't recognize. And in the chair, a figure. Myself. Younger. Softer. The person I had been before I closed this door. He looked up at me. His eyes were sad, but not angry. Just sad. You left, he said. You closed the door and you walked away and you never came back. I stepped into the room. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know what? He stood up. You didn't know that this was important? That I was important? That what we had here mattered? I had no answer. He was right. I had closed the door too fast, without thinking, without looking back. He walked toward me. When he reached me, he didn't stop. He walked into me, through me, becoming part of me again. I felt it all. The hopes I had abandoned. The dreams I had let go. The part of myself I had left behind in that room, behind that door, waiting for years for me to come back. I stood there for a long time, letting it wash over me. When I finally turned to leave, she was waiting at the door. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked. I nodded. I found myself. She smiled. That small smile. We walked back up the steps together. At the top, she traced the crack again, and it closed, becoming ordinary pavement once more. I stood on the corner of 5th and Wells, under the humming streetlight, in the wet night. Everything was the same. Everything was different. You can always go back, she said. To any door you've closed too fast. The cracks are still there. Waiting. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you open a door you thought was closed. Every time you go back for what you left behind. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when I see a crack in the pavement, I stop. I look at it. I remember that beneath every crack, there's a door. And behind every door, there's a part of myself waiting to be found. She traced a crack in the pavement, and it became a path to a door I'd closed too fast. Now I trace my own cracks. And I open every door I find. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the manhole cover in the middle of the intersection, ordinary and unremarkable. But it was humming. Not the way streetlights hum, this was different. Deeper. more complex. Like voices, many voices, all speaking at once just below the range of hearing. I stopped and listened. The hum came from the manhole cover. From beneath it. From somewhere in the darkness below the street. I walked closer. The humming grew louder, more distinct. I could almost make out words, phrases, fragments of conversations I almost recognized. And then I said, "If you'd only listened." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." I knew those voices. They were mine. All of them, from different times, different conversations, different moments when I had cut things short, walked away, refused to listen. The manhole covers were humming with conversations I had ended too soon. I knelt down and placed my hand on the cold metal. The vibration was strong, insistent, like a heartbeat, like a plea. "Let them out," a voice said behind me. I turned. She was there, standing at the edge of the intersection, watching me with those ancient eyes. "The conversations," she said. "The ones you cut short. They're still down there. Still talking. Still waiting for someone to listen. How do I let them out?" She walked toward me slowly. When she reached the manhole cover, she knelt beside me and placed her hand on it too. "You listen," she said. "You really listen. You let them finish." She lifted the cover. It was heavy, but she moved it easily, revealing the darkness below. The humming rose up, louder now, a chorus of my own voice saying things I had never let myself hear. I looked into the darkness. It wasn't empty. It was full of light, of movement, of figures I almost recognized. "Go down," she said. "They've been waiting." I climbed down into the darkness. The space below was vast, a network of tunnels and chambers lit by a soft glow I couldn't identify. And in every chamber, in every tunnel, versions of myself were talking. To friends I had lost. To family I had neglected. To lovers I had left. They were saying the things I had cut off, finishing the conversations I had ended too soon. I walked through the tunnels, listening. Each conversation was a wound I had never healed, a word I had never heard, a goodbye I had never properly said. In one chamber, I saw myself arguing with my father. The argument I had walked away from, years ago, never resolving, never finishing. Down here, it was still going on. Still unresolved. Still waiting. In another, I saw myself on the phone with an old friend, hanging up mid-sentence. Down here, that sentence was still being spoken, over and over, never completed. In another, I saw myself with someone I had loved, walking away without a word. Down here, the words were still being formed, still waiting to be said. I watched them all. Listened to them all. And slowly, I began to understand. The conversations weren't waiting for me to finish them. They were waiting for me to hear them. To really hear them. To let them exist, even if only in memory, even if only in this underground place. I sat down in the middle of the largest chamber, surrounded by all the conversations I had cut short. I closed my eyes and I listened. Really listened. I heard my father's voice, saying the things I had never let him say. I heard my friend's voice, finishing the sentence I had cut off. I heard the voice of the one I had loved, saying the words I had walked away from. And when I had heard them all, when the last conversation fell silent, I opened my eyes. She was there. Sitting beside me in the chamber, watching me with those ancient eyes. "They're finished," I said. She nodded. "They've been heard. That's all they ever wanted." I felt lighter. Freer. As if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. We climbed back up together. She replaced the manhole cover, and the humming was gone. Just ordinary metal, ordinary street, ordinary night. I stood on the corner of 5th and Wells, under the humming streetlight, in the wet night. Everything was the same. Everything was different. You can always go back, she said. To any conversation you cut short. The manhole covers are still there. Still humming. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you listen. Really listen. I'll be there, in the silence after. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when I pass a manhole cover, I pause. I listen. Most are silent now. But some still hum, faintly, with conversations I haven't yet learned to hear. I kneel down. I listen. And I let them finish. The manhole covers hummed with conversations I'd cut short. Now I hear them. All of them. Every word I never let myself hear. And in the silence after, she's there. Waiting. Smiling. Listening with me. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached into my pocket for my keys. My fingers touched paper instead. Soft, folded, unfamiliar. I pulled it out. A letter. Cream-colored paper, folded neatly, my name on the outside in handwriting I recognized. My own handwriting. I stopped walking. I stared at the letter. I didn't remember putting it there. I didn't remember writing it. But I knew what it was. A letter I had written years ago. To someone I had loved. Someone I had lost. Someone I had never sent the letter to because I was afraid, because I thought there would be more time, because I convinced myself it didn't matter. The paper was warm. Warm like it had been held close, like it had been waiting, like it had been kept alive by something I couldn't understand. I unfolded it with trembling hands. The words were mine. Every line, every sentence, every clumsy expression of love and regret and hope. I remembered writing it. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table at 3 in the morning, pouring my heart onto paper, convinced that this letter would change everything. I never sent it. I folded it, put it in an envelope, wrote the address. And then I stopped. I told myself I would send it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became never. The letter stayed in a drawer for years. I forgot about it. I moved on. I told myself it didn't matter. But here it was. In my pocket. Warm. Alive. I looked up. She was standing at the corner ahead, under the streetlight, watching me with those ancient eyes. I walked toward her, the letter still in my hand. How? I asked. She smiled. That small smile. Some things don't stay where we leave them. Some things follow us. Wait for us. Find their way back. I looked at the letter. At the words I had written so long ago. At the love I had never expressed. It's still warm, I said. They've been keeping it warm, she said. All the unsent letters. All the words we never said. They gather in places we can't see, holding each other, keeping each other alive. Waiting for someone to find them. I thought about that. About all the letters I had never sent. All the words I had never said. All the love I had never expressed. They were out there somewhere, warm and waiting. What do I do with it? I asked. She stepped closer. Close enough to touch the letter, though she didn't. You can send it now. Or you can keep it. Or you can let it go. It's yours. It's always been yours. I looked at the address on the envelope. She had moved years ago. The address was wrong. The person I had written to was probably different now, living a different life, not thinking about me at all. But the letter was still warm. Still alive. Still full of words that needed to go somewhere. I can't send it, I said. She's not there anymore. She nodded slowly. Then you send it somewhere else. You send it to yourself. You send it to the night. You send it to all the unsent letters waiting in the dark. I didn't understand. But I felt the truth of it in my bones. I opened the letter again. I read it aloud, standing on the wet street, under the humming streetlight, with her watching. I read about love. About regret. About hope. About all the things I had felt and never expressed. When I finished, the letter was still warm. But lighter now. As if the words had found somewhere to go. She took my hand. The letter was still in it, warm and real. Now you let it go, she said. I looked at the letter. I didn't want to let it go. It was mine. It was part of me. But I knew she was right. I opened my hand. The letter didn't fall. It rose. Lifted by a wind I couldn't feel, carried upward into the night, disappearing into the darkness above the streetlights. I watched it go. When it was gone, I felt empty. And full. Both at once. She was still there, watching me. It will find its way, she said. To her. To you. To all the unsent letters waiting in the dark. They gather together, you know. All the words we never said. They keep each other company. I looked up at the sky where my letter had disappeared. Will I see it again? She smiled. That small smile. Every time you write something you mean. Every time you say the words instead of holding them back. A piece of it will be there, in what you express. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you reach into your pocket and find something you thought you'd lost. I'll be there, keeping it warm. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, my pocket empty, my heart full. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when I reach into my pocket for my keys, I find something else. A scrap of paper. A folded note. A word I forgot I'd written. They're always warm. Always alive. Always waiting to be sent. I reach into my pocket and find a letter I never sent, still warm. And I send it now. Into the night. Into the dark. Into the gathering of all the unsent letters, waiting together, keeping each other warm. And somewhere, in that gathering, she's watching. Smiling. Keeping my words safe until I'm ready to let them go. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood under the streetlight, facing me, her arms at her sides. Her face was calm, patient, those ancient eyes watching me approach. I slowed as I got closer, unsure what to expect. When I was a few feet away, she leaned forward. Just slightly. Just enough. She whispered something. The words were soft, barely a breath. But I heard them. I heard them not with my ears, but with something deeper. My chest. My blood. The place where my heartbeat lived. And what I heard sounded exactly like my own heart making excuses. I didn't have time. It wasn't the right moment. They wouldn't have understood. I'll do it tomorrow. It's too late now. All the justifications. All the reasons I had given myself for not saying the things that needed saying. Not taking the chances that needed taking. Not being the person I could have been. They came out of her whisper, one after another, a litany of my own failures dressed up as practical decisions. I staggered back, my hand on my chest, feeling my heart beat beneath my palm. It was still making excuses. Still justifying. Still protecting me from the truth of what I had failed to do. She watched me, her ancient eyes patient, her lips still slightly parted from the whisper. That's what it sounds like, she said. All the time. Every moment. Your heart making excuses. Most people never hear it. They just live with the noise. I listened. Really listened. Beneath the thump of my pulse, beneath the rush of my blood, I heard it. A steady stream of justifications, of rationalizations, of reasons why I hadn't lived the life I should have lived. I was too tired. I'll start tomorrow. It doesn't matter anyway. No one would notice. They went on, endless and exhausting. How do I make it stop? I asked. She stepped closer. Close enough to touch my chest, right over my heart. You don't make it stop. You listen to it. Really listen. And then you start answering. Answering how? She smiled. That small smile. By doing the things it's making excuses for. By saying the words. By taking the chances. By being the person you keep putting off being. She pressed her hand harder against my chest. I felt my heart beneath her palm, still beating, still making its endless excuses. Every time you act instead of excuse, that voice gets quieter. Every time you say the thing you're afraid to say, that voice loses a little power. Eventually, it has nothing left to excuse. And then it's just a heart. Beating. Present. Free. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you hear your heart making excuses. Every time you choose to act instead. I'll be there, in the space between. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, my hand on my chest, listening to the endless stream of justifications. I stood there for a long time, just listening. The excuses went on, a river of words I had never noticed before. And slowly, I began to answer them. I didn't have time, my heart whispered. Make time, I answered. It wasn't the right moment. There is no right moment. They wouldn't have understood. Give them a chance. The excuses kept coming. I kept answering. And slowly, so slowly, the voice began to quiet. I still walk that route every night. And every night, at the corner of 5th and Wells, I stop. I put my hand on my chest. I listen. The excuses are still there. They'll probably always be there. But I answer them now. I answer them with action, with words, with the life I'm finally starting to live. She whispered something that sounded exactly like my own heart making excuses. And I learned to listen. And answer. And quiet the voice that had been holding me back. Now my heart beats differently. Still making excuses sometimes. But quieter now. Softer. easier to answer. And somewhere, in the space between the excuses and the answers, she's watching. Smiling. Waiting for me to choose action over justification. Again and again and again. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the ordinary street, the ordinary buildings, the ordinary silence. I started to cross. And the city began to speak. Not loudly, not dramatically. Softly, like whispers from every direction. From the buildings. From the streetlights. From the pavement beneath my feet. From the cracks in the walls and the windows above and the gutters along the roofs. Words. Hundreds of them. Thousands. My words. Words I had swallowed. Words I had thought but never said. Words I had held back out of fear, out of politeness, out of the endless need to keep the peace. I love you. I had never said it. The city said it now, in a voice that was almost mine. You hurt me. Swallowed. The city played it back. I'm sorry. Meant but never spoken. The city whispered it from every direction. I need help. Too proud to ask. The city asked for me. I'm scared. Always scared, never admitting it. The city admitted it now. I stood in the middle of the intersection, frozen, as the city played back every word I had ever swallowed. They came from everywhere, from every surface, every shadow, every light. They washed over me like rain, like waves, like a tide I couldn't escape. Some were small. I don't like this. That's not funny. Please stop. Words I had held back in conversations, in relationships, in moments when I should have spoken and didn't. Some were huge. I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore. It's over. Words I had swallowed to avoid conflict, to avoid pain, to avoid the consequences of truth. Some were ancient. Words from childhood. Words from friendships long gone. Words from love that had faded without ever being expressed. The city played them all. Every single one. I sank to my knees in the middle of the intersection, overwhelmed by the sound of my own silence. All those words I had never said. All that truth I had never told. It was everywhere, filling the night, demanding to be heard. When the last word faded, the silence that followed was deeper than any silence I had ever known. I heard footsteps. She walked toward me through the empty intersection, her steps slow and deliberate. When she reached me, she knelt down beside me and placed her hand on my shoulder. They've been waiting, she said softly. All those words. They've been waiting for someone to hear them. I looked at her, tears on my face. Why now? Why tonight? She smiled. That small smile. Because tonight you're ready. Because tonight you can hear them without running. Because tonight you can finally let them go. How do I let them go? She squeezed my shoulder. You acknowledge them. You accept that they're yours. And then you start saying the next ones instead of swallowing them. She stood up and offered me her hand. I took it. She pulled me to my feet. The city will always hold them, she said. Every word you've ever swallowed. They're part of this place now. But you don't have to carry them anymore. You can leave them here. With me. I looked around at the silent city, at the buildings and streetlights and pavement that had just spoken my secret words. They're safe here, she said. They'll be kept. Remembered. But you don't have to carry them anymore. I felt lighter. Not empty, I would never be empty, but lighter. As if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. Will I hear them again? I asked. She nodded slowly. Sometimes. When you need to remember what happens when you stay silent. When you need to be reminded to speak. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you say the words instead of swallowing them. I'll be there, listening. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the intersection, surrounded by the memory of all the words I had never said. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then I walked home. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. But something was different now. I was different. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the city is still, I hear them. Faint whispers from the buildings and streetlights and pavement. My swallowed words. My unspoken truths. I listen. I acknowledge. I remember. And then I speak. I say the next words instead of swallowing them. I tell the truth. I express the love. I ask for the help. I let the words out into the world, where they can be heard instead of saved. The city held every word I'd swallowed and played them back, one by one. Now I hold them too. But differently. I hold them as reminders. As lessons. As the sound of a life that finally learned to speak.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.